Some people will not understand how far you've come. Your job isn't to over-explain. Keep leading by example. They'll either get it or they won't. Posted by Alex L. Reposted by Megan Good. Welcome to Tuesday's episode of the Toy Talks podcast. Welcome all returning listeners. And of course, a welcome to all our new listeners as well. I am very aware that we have new listeners and we have people who have been 10 toes deep from the conception of the Toy Talks podcast. If you don't know already, my name is Toy Washington. I am the host of the Toy Talks podcast and of course the founder, creator of the Toy Talks platform. This is a podcast, a safe place for Black women to gather, where we talk about the world of work. My job is to guide, educate and teach Black women how to navigate the world of work successfully and in turn light up the path of our success. I share all my stories, my personal experiences of others through dilemmas about the world of work, because I have attained success in my career in the world of work, navigating white spaces, and I continue to navigate white spaces as well, and I continue to, I would say, excel in my career, but it's not without its issues, drama, problems, headache, and I do bring a lot of that to the podcast, especially in terms of how I deal with things now. And creating the podcast has been an opportunity to have a cathartic space to share. Equally, recognizing that in my early 20s, I had no view of how to navigate the world of work. In fact, I'll go as far as to say I didn't understand that there was something to navigate. I just thought you work hard, pass your exams, and you start working, and it's great because you've worked hard to be here. Little did I know that being a woman and being a Black woman wouldn't necessarily put me in a situation whereby I could just attain success as easily as our white counterparts. In fact, working whilst Black is a thing. Working whilst a Black woman is another thing. And to be able to have created a space whereby we can share, and a safe space for Black women, for us, because it's not very often that we have spaces just for us. We recognise that in the world of work and often in life, we're not picked first. So I pick Black women first because I pick myself. I am a Black woman and I have created a safe space for us to share, us to learn, but more importantly, to grow. You guys will remember the last episode of the Toy Talks podcast and the podcast before, I did say that I need to do an episode on how to use your burn folders. And it was literally like I just put it out there and I told you guys, and I don't often share like future episodes, not for any reason other than the fact that I have scoped out future episodes, but I never know kind of which one would come first. Like I never necessarily prioritize them in an order. I just allow the ancestors to come talk to me. And last week was no different. So I always knew that I needed to do an episode about how to use your burn folders. If you don't know what a burn folder is something that you create to detail and document patterns of behavior that are either aggressive, with racial undertones, macroaggressions, anything that makes you uncomfortable in the workplace. It's a folder called a burn folder because the content of that folder is a covering to protect you. And if you have to reach for the burn folder, it often means that you have now been placed in a situation where you have no choice, or your work life has become intolerable. The reason I called it the burn folder is because the things inside there burn, okay? And often throughout the episodes of the Toy Talks podcast, I do talk about the importance of a burn folder and how people have used burn folders and they've used, the dilemma episodes to write in and explain, but I've never actually had a episode concentrated to a burn folder and how to use it in terms of, okay, now you've created it, now what? And last week was Dominic Cummings. It was a week of Dominic Cummings. For those of you outside of the UK, Dominic Cummings is the former Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister of the UK. His name is Boris Johnson. You would know when you've seen Boris Johnson because for some reason he has a phobia of a comb. He doesn't use combs to comb his hair, and recently I've noticed as well that irons seem to elude him as well. Anyway, he is the former Chief of Staff and he was actually really, really instrumental in certain things that have happened in the UK. So for example, Brexit. Dominic Cummings kind of seemingly came from nowhere, but yet he quickly established himself as the Prime Minister's right hand. Where you saw Boris, you saw Dominic Cummings. Now, the reason why last week was absolutely groundbreaking, in fact, I'll go as far as to say it will go down in history, is because Dominic Cummings left number 10 Downing Street in the middle of COVID, okay? The global pandemic that has literally brought the world to its knees. And he walked out through the front door with a box. And when I saw that image, when I saw it on TV, him walking out of number 10 Downing Street, not out the back, out the front, I knew that he had chosen violence. I knew. Because you know that you're walking out to the world's press. You've got a box in your hand. Like, you are choosing violence. And I think that people underestimated the significance of him doing that. Remembering also that Dominic Cummings knows the deepest, darkest secrets of number 10 and everything that has gone on since he became Boris Johnson's chief of staff. So last week was the parliamentary committee where, I mean, I don't know any other way to say it. Dominic Cummings was singing like a canary. Yeah? He came by himself, sending no one. He said, you see what? I'm going to talk the talk. And he was basically being asked questions in which he was revealing the shocking and diabolical way in which COVID was handled here in the UK, and some of the catastrophic decisions or omittance of certain decisions that then had a domino effect in terms of the lives and the number of lives lost as a result of COVID, but more so at the hands of a government that basically were just moving crazy and moving mad. Dominic Cummings is a really interesting character because as chief of staff, he was non-conventional. He barely wore a suit. I think the only time we saw him in any type of kind of suit-like attire was when he broke COVID rules. Yeah, the chief of staff to the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom broke COVID rules. And then he went in front of the world's press and was questioned. And the reason why he said that he broke COVID rules is he needed to test drive his car because he got new tyres. So he wanted to check the tyres. This, you know what? This is when white people don't give a shit. When you know that the rules are there to benefit you, you could just talk shit and people just have to accept it. Everybody was calling for his resignation, calling for Boris Johnson to sack him. And Boris Johnson stood right beside him, 10 toes deep. That loyalty was different. That this man came. How are you coming in front of the world's press to justify why you broke COVID rules? His shirt buttons were undone. It was at least 4 of them, because he knew he was relaxing. He knew at the end of the day he weren't going anywhere. Why? Because he had made himself such an important figure in terms of the government, and to Boris, he was everything to Boris in terms of Boris's political career and his climb to be the Prime Minister. And I definitely understand, recognise and acknowledge the inner workings of the things that Dominic Cummings had to do to position Boris to be put him in a position to be the Prime Minister. If you want to underestimate Dominic Cummings, then I suggest that you go ahead and go on YouTube and look at the parliamentary committee that happened last week. You've got to also remember that everything that's been happening in the UK, from Brexit, COVID, it has been managed in the most shambolic way. And the people that pay the price is us, the citizens. Dominic Cummings left in the manner that he did. And there was a media storm as to the reason why he had walked out. It was, unpredicted. It was shocking. It came from left field. And I don't know what it was that was the turning point for him, where now he's now become a public whistleblower. What was absolutely amazing about kind of watching Dominic Cummings during the parliamentary committee was the way he used his burn folder. Because up until that point, I don't think people really realised that he had one, and then the full extent of what was contained in the burn folder. And I think as it stands now, people still don't know what is contained in the burn folder. This man was questioned for 7 hours and he was snitching on all of them. We're talking about Nick Hancock, Boris himself. He was talking about anyone who had any hand in the decision making and has had hand in decision making insofar as the pandemic, Dominic Cummings was talking. And you know, all his teeth is scattered. And I realised it's because the truth is forcing its way out of his mouth. So that's why his teeth is all scattered. This man was talking. Even the ones he was talking, they said, you have talked. And all of us were like, well, I say all of us, but the people that I spoke to were in absolute shock. Because in our lifetime, we've not really seen Oyubos snitch like this. I mean, you've got Prince Harry. The way Harry and Oprah are moving, yeah? The way they're moving, it's like he laid the groundwork for Snitchville. That's happening now. But back to the burn folder. So remembering, Dominic Cummings came voluntarily, okay? He came voluntarily. They set up the parliamentary committee. And if you were to watch it, without realising it, you think that he was in a courtroom. Now, take into consideration, he has sworn an oath to tell the truth. But it is a very relaxed environment insofar as it's not like he's taking a witness stand or anything. He's basically talking about the failings of the current sitting government in terms of their handling of the global coronavirus pandemic. He took to the world stage to do that, because this was cascaded all over the world for everybody to see. In fact, Boris Johnson is better off just opening number 10 down the street and taking his pant off and letting us see his bum, because Dominic Cummings has basically done that. Before we really look at how Dominic Cummings used his burn folder, I think we need to look at the way he has presented himself. Whenever we have thought about politicians, especially if you're a chief of staff, we consider those people quite intrinsic to the fabric of the government. But the way in which Dominic Cummings positioned himself, in the way he answered questions, the manner that he answered questions, remembering a lot of people that were asking him questions were also on video link. He had the world's press. People were asking this man questions for 7 whole hours. At no point did he show any emotion in the way he answered these questions. So you can very clearly see, understand and know that him and Boris have had a falling out. You know that he doesn't like Boris Johnson's girlfriend, because he said it when he was asked the question as his motivations for now kind of revealing all this stuff and all this information. He said, is one of the reasons you resigned because you don't get on with Boris Johnson's girlfriend? He said, yeah. He actually referred to her as Boris Johnson's girlfriend because I think they mentioned her by name. He referred to her as the girlfriend, which I thought was quite shady, because at that point, she wasn't the girlfriend, she was the fiancée. But it's his way of kind of throwing shade and still being PC without being disrespectful, but still being disrespectful. And white people are really good at that. It's like that kind of pervasive, what they quote as unconscious shade, but we all know it's a conscious shade to reaffirm position and let everybody know how they see other people. I think as a black woman, and I speak for myself here, especially when I didn't understand how to navigate work, I always came from a place of emotion. And I know that it's really difficult to not come from that space when often we're so invisible in the workplace, often we're pushed to the brink. And all we have is the pent-up emotion of all the experiences that we have had that has led us to a point now where we've just broken down or exploded. But one thing I've always said to you guys is when I have watched how to navigate the world of work, I've learned it from white people, because they navigate in structures that have been created to benefit them. They've created the policies, the rules, the mechanisms in which we are supposed to operate, but yet they never follow their own rules. Often they create these policies and never look at them again. And then they underestimate us because they don't see us. We're very much invisible to them. And therefore, when we use the policies that they've created to cover us or defend us, they don't know what to do. And this is how you disarm white people in the world of work. It's not by beating your chest, screaming, shouting, a whole heap of emotion, when you know that these are the same people that rid us of emotion, that refuse to attribute black women with any type of feeling on emotion. So when you show white people this emotion, they don't know what to do. It's foreign to them. They don't even acknowledge or recognize it. You could be having a nervous breakdown in the middle of the office and they will just look at you like there is something wrong with you, rather than actually, do you know, this person's really suffering and going through something. They don't see that when they see us. Do you understand? They don't attribute any type of human emotion to us. But our white counterparts, They just have to sniff and everybody comes running. And we know that. White females in the workplace are treated so much more differently than black women. So when we are now having to either make a complaint or have to reassert our position or having to address certain difficult situations in the world of work, often we have always come from a space of emotion. I know this, I put my hand up, I have done that, and it gets me nowhere. In fact, showing emotion to the degree that I used to in my younger years led me to either be managed out, forced to leave, or asked to leave, in that order. But Dominic Cummings, during the parliamentary questions, he showed humanity insofar as he was critical of himself. He was asked questions like, do you feel like you managed COVID very well? Were your decisions intrinsic to some of the decision making of Boris? You know, they asked him really hard hitting questions. And he was very, very, very honest, to the point where he didn't have to bring another person down to reaffirm or assert himself or reaffirm his honesty. He just, in his words, he would tell you he said the truth. I don't know the truth, because the only people that know the truth is him, Boris, and anybody else in the rooms when the decisions were being made. We weren't in those rooms, right? There's now been a huge falling out, and what they're asking, Mr. Cummings is asking us to do is to believe what he says, and he makes for a very credible witness. He makes for a very credible person, and I'll tell you the reason why. In the way that he held himself out and the way he spoke, for the very first time during those parliamentary questions, I saw him as an employee. Up until that time, I never did. I didn't. And I know that sounds really weird, but when we think of politicians, we don't think of them as employees. We don't. We think of them as anything other than how we see ourselves. Because to see Dominic Cummings as an employee, we are employees ourselves, so we have to see him on the same level as ourselves. But we know proximity to privilege is not something that we have as black women. But also recognizing as well that Dominic Cummings was hired by Boris Johnson. His employer is the government. It is Boris Johnson. And for the first time I saw that in how he exited with his box from the front door, and then how he presented himself during the parliamentary questions. He gave a critical analysis of himself and his decisions, but more importantly, he shone a light on the failings of a government that is refused to acknowledge any responsibility and culpability. And that's how it is in the world of work, isn't it? Organisations and managers themselves will never admit liability for anything, or never admit their failings. It's us that have to almost force their hand in acknowledging and taking responsibility. Then he went a step further. When they were questioning him, he didn't stutter, he was unwavering. He came across as a very credible witness because he didn't put anybody down, he didn't curse, he didn't show any anger. It was very factual. Everything he said was factual. And these are the things I say to you guys. Take the emotion out of it and keep it factual. And anytime he felt like his facts needed to be supported, we would see extracts from his burn folder. Can you believe that this man had a picture of a whiteboard from number 10 Downing Street on a projector within the parliamentary questions? That means that he took a picture of it. He took a picture of it whilst he was employed by the government, yeah? And they're talking about COVID and they're having strategic meetings. Dominic Cummings was building his burn folder because he took a picture of it. A whiteboard with red writing, red marker pen. And then he used it to support whatever notion or whatever position that he was asserting based on the questions he was being asked. And that, to me, was so strategic because, number one, what in a sense he's telling you is from the moment he walked into that number 10 Downing Street, he was building his burn folder. This is exactly what I tell you guys. From day one, open that burn folder. It's not you being negative about where you're going to work or da-da-da-da-da. It's you understanding that to navigate the world of work, the structures are not built for your success. They're not. But you know that you have to work within those structures. You have to navigate accordingly. So you're going to have to protect yourself. Dominic Cummings' burn folder is his insurance policy, because he knows the type of employers that he's dealing with. They'll sell him down the river. He knows. And he knew it at the point in which he took a picture of the whiteboard, or a strategic board. He took a picture of it. And then they put it there on the screen for all of us to see. And everything on that board supported everything that he was saying. And for me, when I looked at that, I laughed. Do you know why I laughed? Because what he's doing is he's telling everybody, he's telling his employers, whatever it is that you want to do, however you want to come at me, you better understand that this is just one of many, many, many examples of extracts of a burn folder that I have, that I know that can single-handedly bring down this government. If you're not learning lessons from what I'm saying, this is everything I've ever told you here on the podcast when it comes to burn folder. I've told you this. Even the white man knows that a fellow white man will sell him down the river if he has to. What more a black person? What more a black woman? You need to shine your eyes, because everybody thinks that work is roses, or oh, it'll get better, or if I do this. They don't want to see us. They have no choice but to, because we appear best in class. We appear for them as best in class because we have been trained to understand that in order for us to even be considered, we have to work twice as hard. We have to invest twice as hard. And we have to work twice as hard. So when we present ourselves, go into interviews and present yourself, they may not want to see you, but they need those credentials that you have. They need that experience. So they have no choice. If they want best in class, and that's one thing about white people, they want the best, but they don't like the fact that the best looks like us. But we give them no choice, and you have to be the subject matter expert. You have to build your career folder. You have to have objectives. You have to project manage your career to be able to stand in front of these people, present yourself in front of these people, to get access to certain arenas, to get access to certain roles, to get access to certain platforms and positions. And then when you get there, you've got to understand you're working two jobs. The actual job and the job of ensuring that you're protecting yourself too. And that, my dear, is how you ensure your success. And it's also how you mitigate issues that may arise that you may not foresee. Dominic Cummings walked in there knowing what he's dealing with. He knows. And you've got to remember as well, every image you've seen of Dominic Cummings, he doesn't really fit the mold. He's like that scruff bag, you know, that scruff pot. But you know he's highly intelligent. But he's not like the rest of them in terms of he's not going to be in a pokey suit and tie and shoes and all of that. Nah, my man would come in with one jumper how can somebody's clothes look like it smells? He just look like his clothes would look like it smells. But if this man will tell you how much he's on a year, you will just be shaking. This is the same person that had the ear of the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, is now sitting before a parliamentary committee singing like a canary with a heap of documents within a burn folder to support him. He knows that he had to cover himself. He recognised that this COVID crisis was being dealt with in such a diabolical way. He didn't want to be the scapegoat for that. He refused to be the scapegoat, and he said, right, I'm going to have to protect myself. I need an insurance policy to make sure that they can never position me as a scapegoat to take responsibility for any of their stupid decisions, for any of their reckless decisions, for any of their harmful decisions. And then we turn that to us. This man, during this committee, was teaching us how to use a burn folder. How was he doing that? He didn't go there and say, look, I've got all of this stuff and start listing them like shopping lists. Nope. He showed one or two things. And those one and two things were heavyweight things. They were damning. It would then make you think, what else does this man have? And you know that the government, especially Boris Johnson, you know that he's worried. Do you know why you know he's worried? Because he hasn't said anything to really address anything that Boris Johnson has said. In fact, what the government has done is blocked any inquiry into the handling of COVID. They've blocked it. Absolutely blocked it, using the excuse that, yeah, we're still in a pandemic, which is true, but also the fact that they should be able to answer questions. I mean, come on. We apparently are the people that are voted to have put them there in government. So we should be the ones that are able to ask them to answer questions about the way they're handling things. Remember, Dominic Cummings went there voluntarily to answer questions. Now, when we look at him in terms of the burn folder and credibility, I want to also position this. When I'm telling you how to use your burn folder, I'm using what's happened last week with Dominic Cummings in the Parliamentary Committee as an example. Part of using your burn folder is also about you as a person. It's also about credibility and strength of character. No one can sit here and ever say Dominic Cummings did this or said this in public to discredit this or shame this, because he didn't do it. He's not done it. He's held himself and positioned himself in such a way that you may judge him based on decisions that he made, but you have to respect him for the fact that at the end of the day, he was employed to do a job and he did it. When he was asked questions, sometimes they will change the questions and ask him again. He answers in exactly the same way. In doing so, he's building his credibility. He's basically convinced us, a lot of us, by watching him, that actually, no matter the decisions he made, the person who's culpable and responsible for everything is Boris Johnson. And this is what happens in the world of work, you see. A lot of you are running to go and sit with HR. I keep telling you that HR are not your friends. I keep telling you that HR has been hired to protect the interest of the organisation. So understand that when you are navigating white spaces and you're navigating the world of work, know that you will not find allies in human resources. No, you won't. You might find one or two people that are willing to talk and say certain things, but those are not your allies. Because at the end of the day, HR move by separate rules as well, you know. In fact, they're the mouthpiece for the organisation. And they're even more dangerous. You know why? Because they're human resources. That's why they're dangerous. So you better be careful. When you are now going to HR or you're making a formal complaint, right? The first thing I say to everybody, you know your burn folder, you can't start building it at the point in which you decide to make a complaint. That's not when you start developing burn folder. You develop a burn folder. If you forgot to do it from the onset of your employment, then it's when you start noticing patterns of behavior that are making you uncomfortable or are demonstrating racism, sexism, whatever it is that is being magnified and making your role uncomfortable. When you start seeing those patterns, that's when you start building a burn folder. Me, I do it on day one. Day one, I open a burn folder. Now, some people will ask me, and how do you save this burn folder? You have an option. There are some organizations you work for, you can't email stuff to yourself because they have like proxy wars, but more importantly as well, there's some organizations that if you email your personal email, it will like send like a trigger to IT. So you've got to be careful how you email stuff to yourself. Number one, that's what you have to be careful about. Number two, you can create a burn folder in your local drive and use the printer to print off stuff. Yes, you can. You can print it off. No one's tracking what you're printing. They know you've printed stuff, but they don't know what it is. You can print things off. My burn folder, I print my burn folder bi-weekly so that it's updated. Anytime it's updated, the extra updates is what I print. And then I have a plastic pocket that I put everything in. Yeah, screenshots, everything. Some of you, maybe you don't have access to printers, but you have a mobile phone. I'm telling you that Dominic Cummings was taking pictures on his mobile phone that has now been used in his burn folder, that he's now using to support his claims in a parliamentary committee. So you have no excuse for the reason why you can't build a burn folder. Take a fucking picture. Some of you will be like, oh, I'm going to record this person. You need to understand that you can't record people without their permission and then seek to use it to defend yourself. The recording thing is... This is why I tell you, when something happens and there's a meeting, you follow it up with an email. Because when you follow it up with an email, you're number one, forcing the person to acknowledge the conversation and the content. If they don't respond to your email, the silence is acceptance to your initial email to them. Period. And that's how you'll position it. So when a person now comes and says, oh, I didn't mean that, I didn't say that, this didn't happen. You say, well, you didn't respond. So to me, your silence is acknowledgement that number one, that you agree with me. And number two, that this situation that I've explained that has happened. Full stop. So there is no reason why you guys can't create and maintain a burn folder. Some people will send me dilemmas and I'll ask them one simple question. They'll tell me all these meetings that happen. And I'll say, okay, did you record it? I wrote it down. Okay. When you wrote it down, what did you do with the paper? Yeah, I put it away. I put it in my burn folder. No one cares about your log. No one cares about your log. Do you know why? Because you could be updating that log. In fact, you could be making it up. We need an audit trail. We need an audit trail. Do you know how much is in my burn folder? Do you know? Things that happen and I'll be thinking, And then you'll be watching things develop. And I will make sure I create an audit trail. So the person can't say it didn't happen, they didn't see it, they didn't know. No, there's one thing with white people I've come to realise, especially white-dominated spaces, is they suffer from forgetfulness. They forget all the time, they forget. Or anytime it's to the benefit of a black person, they forget. So for me, it's important that I remind them. Yeah? Clinical studies of reminder. That's what I deal in. Unless you understand the true inner workings of white spaces, you are always going to fall down in terms of being able to elevate and navigate white spaces successfully. I don't care what anyone says. Black women have no proximity to any type of privilege in the workplace. Black men have proximity to the masculinity and therefore have proximity to fellow white men. But black women don't have any type of privilege. So we're already working from a position of disadvantage. So my question is, when are you going to start deciding to put yourself in a position of advantage? What does advantage look like? Advantage look like for me is making sure I've got myself covered. Because when we work in white spaces, under white constructs, we work quite exposed. We're quite exposed if you think about it, because we're on the front line of any type of discrimination, any type of disadvantageous behavior and decisions that will directly impact us. We're exposed to that. So if you think of things in that way, then I think, well, if I've overexposed myself, I need to now create spaces or things to cover myself. And the only way that's going to happen is my burn folder. Then after your burn folder proceeds a feedback folder. And I've spoken about feedback folders in great detail. But for the purposes of this episode, we're talking about burn folders and how to use them. Dominic Cummings was asked a question. He said that the person that he was asked many questions, by the way. It was absolutely fantastic to see the inner workings, see how white people really, really are able to use policies and structures to cover them. You trying to tell me that Dominic Cummings didn't sign an Official Secrets Act or some type of non-disclosure agreement when he took up the role of Chief of Staff? Of course he did. Then he went to a lawyer because he references his lawyer during the committee questions. And he's asked a question, right? He's asked, they said, oh, are you going to kind of release some of these WhatsApp messages that you've referred to? Do you know what he said? I have no problem with releasing them, but before I do so, I need to speak to my lawyer. Do you know what that tells me? It tells me that his burner folder consists of more than just emails and pictures. He has got WhatsApp messages on his phone that he has saved, and I guarantee you they're all printed off. I guarantee it. Because he doesn't want to now go to his phone, everything's wiped off. Maybe Apple said they did upgrade. Yeah, Apple, government upgrade. Yeah. He said he's got to speak to his lawyer. Do you know what that said to me? It tells me that, number one, there's a lot more in that burn folder. Number two, he has a legal team behind him that are advising him how to stay on the right side of the law while still be honest and still be able to release the things he wants to release. Number three, it also tells me that it hasn't stopped. He's come for violence and war. He's come to war with them. Now, the only thing that is not clear is his motivation. And he was asked this question. They were like, why now? And, he started babbling on, this self-righteousness of doing the right thing, blah, blah, blah. But my thing has always been, well, when the wrong things were being done, you were still there. So this doing the right thing, part of it is because you were squeezed out of your position by Boris Johnson's then girlfriend. That's what it is. And you were angry that Boris Johnson chose his girlfriend over you. and you were upset with the decisions that Boris was making because it wasn't in line with what you was advising him to do. That's the reason now you're singing like a canary. And it's an ego thing. His ego is so bruised and he's so angry. But in order for him to position himself as a credible witness, he has to work through that anger and position it in such a way that it looks like he's telling the truth for the greater good of the nation. That's what he's doing. It's just a political move, but it's a strategic political move that is important as us, as black women, we learn from. If you want to know how to navigate in white spaces, you have to be prepared to study white people, how they navigate in their own spaces. They create the rules and fall down at the first hurdle of their rules. They do, because when you now use their rules to come and tell them, listen, your policy said this, and now you're not trying to use that policy for me. They will, they don't even remember the things that they create to keep us in a box. But they're working within the same environment that the rules are created. I think something that I also wanted to highlight as well is that remember as well that if you watch, and I would really encourage you guys to really watch the committee questions, and even if it's just highlights, I need you guys to watch it. I need you guys to commit to, even if you're watching sound bites. And I don't think it should be something that you just hear. You need to see it. Here is a white man in his white shirt, unironed, obviously, a couple of buttons undone. And he's sitting there challenging the government's decision, the very government that employed him. He's been working there for a couple of years at least. And in the midst of a global pandemic, this man has chosen that this is the time in which he's going to sing from the highest top of the mountain. And he's done it in such a way that you can't really attack him, because he was just an employee. And we didn't acknowledge that then when he was side by side with Boris, making all these decisions. We never saw him like that. And this is often how it is in the workplace, right? We're working in these organizations, we're carrying these organizations on our back. Some of us really feel like if we burn that midnight oil, yeah, they're gonna see us. But really, we're just an employment number. You're just an employee. Me, I'm a contractor, but I'm still an employee. I'm still employed by my limited company at the end of the day. And as soon as we see Dominic Cummings as an employee, then we now start humanizing him. We do. For me, I found myself humanizing him. And in humanizing him, I gave him credibility, because he gave himself credibility by his unwavering responses. When HR start questioning you and start saying certain things and start goading you, rather than resort to the emotion that they tell us we don't possess, you need to understand the strategy in which you're going to make this complaint. And this is what I always say to you. When you guys email me with your dilemmas, one of the first things I say to you is, what outcome are you seeking? What do you want? Because that will then tell me how you're going to navigate, but it also tells me where you're sitting mentally and emotionally in dealing with your employer. Oh, I just want to get paid. I don't respond to your email again, because I'm not here, I don't do a no-win, no-fee service. That's not what I do here. Most of you that email me are very, very clear in your expectation. I want to be able to do my job here. I want to do this. I want to do this. I want to get this. And actually, yes, they do need to give me compensation for this because of this, this, and this. It's very structured. And this is how it has to be. At the point in which you understand that you're now going to go toe-to-toe with your manager, your employer, you've got your burn folder ready, the strategy is what you now have to develop. Okay, so I'm going to now use the policies in terms of making a formal complaint. I would expect you to go on the intranet or to find out from HR, how do you make a formal complaint and who do you make that to? Extrapolate and find all those policies in which you are now going to assert yourself and use to benefit yourself. You don't go there and tell them, oh, I've got all this evidence. This evidence is here. I've got this. No. No, you don't do that. I remember the particular place I was working at, and I made a formal complaint against my manager. I was only young. But when I say only young, I have to say that because when I made the complaint against my manager, I had no concept of kind of looking at what complaints look like in an organisation, how you're supposed to clear. Imagine I put the complaint into my manager about my manager. I was about 22. And when I made the complaint against my manager, really what should have happened is she should have sent that to HR, innit? No, that's not what she did. You know what she did do? She managed me out. Because I was still on probation. I hadn't been there long. I think I'd been there for 2 months. And she'd bullied me every day for the 2 months that she hired me. She didn't even hire me. It was her PA that hired me. But for the 2 months I was there, she bullied the hell out of me. And then rather than make the complaint and await the response, I made the complaint and all the evidence I had, I gave. When I gave that, it took them 7 days to manage me out. I was 22. And I felt so cheated. I felt so angry. I was in the right. I was the one that was quote unquote the victim. I was the one that suffered at the hands of her bullying me. I am the one that she was screaming and shouting at inside her office, telling me that am I stupid? I was the one that she told me that I need to go to the toilet and think about my behaviour. I was the person that she said that to. I'm the one that she emailed and said, when you email me, make sure you say good morning or good afternoon. Don't say hi. I'm not your friend. Those are the things that she would do. She would bully me daily to a point that I would be petrified to send her an email. How about the time when she humiliated me in a team meeting and she asked me to go and get everybody water or tea or coffee and she threw the money at me? But I didn't manage that well. I was 22, I was young, I was impressionable. I didn't understand the inner workings of work or how to be strategic in defending and protecting myself. I went for the jugular because I believed that in justice. I thought right is right and wrong is wrong. So because I'm right, everybody's going to know I'm right. My boss is going to do the right thing. Until I realised actually, no. People do the right thing if they want to. People don't understand the importance of doing the right thing, especially when white people are operating in privilege. The right thing is whatever they dictate the right thing is. Listen, people know right from wrong, but also I believe in white spaces, white people understand their privilege. They act like they don't. When you call them out on their privilege, they feel attacked, but they understand how to use their privilege to make sure that you're disadvantaged. You know, when I was younger, it was more of a case of not being believed, being questioned about whether I thought what I thought, being gaslighted, being questioned about my account of what's happened, but being questioned not from a position of wanting to understand, but from a position of we don't believe you and we need you to convince me. I don't need to convince anyone of anything. You heard the opening statement and the opening post of this podcast. I'm not here to convince you. As long as I have my burn folder that support my assertions, as far as I'm concerned, whether you believe me or not, the truth speaks for itself. One thing I've realised about organisations as well, they don't like being labelled certain things. The access to social media has made it so that organisations have to be accountable, or at least have to be accountable on a public stage. Whereas before, when I was growing up, I didn't grow up in social media. Social media has come about over the last 10 years, but I say 10 years, but I'd say I didn't start appreciating social media until I'd say 6 to 10 years, but I didn't grow up with it. Okay. So organizations would be doing mad things and there'd be nowhere that somebody could post or go and see or call out employees. That never really happened. There wasn't a platform like the platform that I've created here where we can have honest conversations, where I'm empowered by my wanting to be successful. I'm empowered by my burn folder and allowing my burn folder to be my covering. I'm empowered by knowledge and wisdom to know how to navigate spaces. I didn't have that. I wasn't empowered. I was disempowered because white people wanted to show me that they were in charge, and I felt oppressed in organizations and places where I often felt invisible. And then at times when I didn't feel invisible, I felt oppressed because I was made to know that I didn't have a voice. And if I did, it just would not be heard because it wasn't loud enough. You know, as black women, I definitely know that working whilst black has become an extreme sport. I'm under no illusion at the difficulties that we often encounter daily. And even for me, like, the more senior I have become, the higher the level, the higher the devil. The devil in the detail of the way that white people operate. It's more heightened the more senior you go, and it's more obvious. And the fact still remains that I have to cover myself. So, you know, with this particular contract, from day one, I've had my burn folder. And it was on day one that my manager sent that. Remember I told you guys that I'd been there for about 48 hours. She didn't even know I was there. I emailed her just to let her know, like, I'm working, obviously starting remotely or whatever. And she sent a really horrible email about me. And I know this because when I had my first meeting with her remotely, she confessed that she accidentally sent an email to me when she was supposed to send it to somebody else, and that she apologises for the content, this, that, and a third. Until now, I've never opened that email, you know. I've just put it in my burn folder. I've just never opened it because I felt, and I did explain at the time, that I didn't want to have a skewed opinion of her. And in fact, I think that would have set the cats amongst the pigeons with me, because it would have challenged me to overlook it and work with her, knowing full well that whatever she has written in that burn folder, I know for a fact that for her to admit it, for her to come clean, for her to honestly feel the need to explain herself. We're talking about a senior director here. Whatever she's written in there would have been very, 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 very detrimental to her, especially because she'd never met me before when she sent that. God knows what is in it. And I put it straight in my burn folder. So this is what I say to you, from day one, people decide to operate and move mad. In fact, that first hour that you're there, they just want to move crazy. Talk less being in the environment that we are now, working remotely. I feel like people's madness has been heightened because people hate themselves, you see. They don't want to be working remotely. They need to be in an office. So their behaviour is becoming very erratic. The things that I have seen working remotely with people I have never met in the flesh is crazy. It's crazy, especially because white people believe that they're operating on a higher level. So they believe the rules don't apply to them. So they're just moving crazy, and to a point where, you know, when your burn folder is so full that you have to create a subfolder to the burn folder. Yeah, this pandemic, I've come to understand that with white people, they need the workplace, they need it, they have to have it, because that's their playing ground, that's their nucleus to how they oppress black people and black women. They need a construct around them because that's their protection, that's their excuse, that gives them permission to behave the way that they do. So my question will always be, when are you going to make the decision to start operating from a place of knowledge? When are you going to start observing how non-black people who create these organizations, create these rules, create these policies, create these environments, when you're going to start observing them and therefore understanding how to operate with them? Sometimes you're left with no choice but to make a complaint. I always see it as the last resort. When I have attempted to try and resolve, when I have maybe even changed the way I operate, again, documenting everything, putting it in the burn folder. When I was 22 and I made that complaint against the manager and all of this, I still didn't understand where I'd gone wrong because I was telling the truth. Things have happened in the world of work for me that has been like a baptism of fire. So now, if like a few years ago when I was an employee and I made a formal complaint, and you guys, I remember telling you guys when the girl told me to F off, I was giving her contractual legal advice as part of my job, and she basically swore at me. When I went to HR, even with the person confessing, they were still saying that she didn't swear at me, she swore at the situation. But I already had my evidence in my burn folder. The other person that was in the room, when I'd gone back to my desk, I emailed them and I said to them, was it instant messenger? I messaged them and I said, that was a really uncomfortable situation to be in. I can't believe this person swore, to create an audit trail. Not that we both know it happened, but I need an audit trail. And then the witness said, yeah, her swearing was out of order, So whether HR believed me or not, I didn't care. How can somebody from HR stand in my face and tell me the person didn't swear at you, they swore at the situation, but you wasn't there? That is how white people operate. They will gaslight you into genuinely questioning whether what happened, even though they weren't there. There are non-black people that we work with that will never understand, and they can't understand what it is to work whilst black. They will never understand that their privilege has been created to oppress us. But rather than us understanding how to navigate, we fall short when we think that all things are equal. It doesn't work like that. You're looking for justice all the time. It doesn't always work like that. It doesn't. Sometimes you can be in the right, make a formal complaint, have your burn folder, and an organisation says to you, we'll pay you out, but you want to stay. But organisations would rather pay you out and get rid of you because they don't want you to start telling people what they're like, or exposing them, or telling them what you have used, the methods you've used to expose them. They'll rather pay and get rid of you. Yeah. And it's tough, especially when you have done nothing wrong. This is the structures in which we're working in. So it's better that we shine our eyes and understand how to navigate accordingly. Dominic Cummings is not only an employee, but he's a credible witness to what's happened. And he is an example of how to use a burn folder effectively without telling people everything that you have in your burn folder. He's just laid crumbs. He's laid crumbs. And he's goading Boris. Come on, Boris. If you really want to come at me, come at me. Because let me tell you something. He ain't dropped nothing yet. Oh, no. He ain't dropped nothing yet. Even the world's press, what happened last week should have been on every single channel. But if you look at it, it wasn't really reported that much. It wasn't, not really. Well, we know, like, kind of with the BBC being in the government's back pocket, so you can't expect the BBC to really report blow for blow what happened. There were certain media outlets, but for the most part, I saw it online. Live online, Sky News online, I saw it there live. And Boris's response? He was supposed to get married next year. My man got married yesterday. Literally, was it 3 days after Dominic Cummings committee questioning? And that's how I feel like, you know how they say English people are politely disrespectful? I get it. He would rather distract everybody than actually deal with it. He would rather, this is Boris by the way, would rather pretend that something doesn't exist rather than deal with it. And I find that that's genuinely, in white spaces, how white people deal with stuff. When you confront them with the unequivocal truth, when you confront them with the evidence, just crumbs, they run. But where was the energy and chest when you were coming here to oppress and disrespect and be rude and be discriminatory against me? Where is that person? And this is why I feel like it's important to understand the environment that you're working in. And it's not always negative, right? I'm not sitting here saying, you know, working for white people, white spaces are all negative. I'm not saying that. For some people, the experience isn't all negative. But there are negative elements sometimes of your employment or some organisations you work within. And often, I feel as though we are goaded. And it's almost like we're goaded with one hand behind our back because you know the system hasn't been set up to benefit you. And then you feel like, well, if I then confront the inequalities and injustices here, do I center myself and make myself a target? And the answer is yes. You do. You do. Whenever you go against an organisation, a manager, HR, whatever, you do make yourself a target. And this is why I say you have to cover yourself. You have to make sure your nose is clean. You have to make sure your emails are clean. You have to make sure that you're on the right side of whatever is going to be the fallout of you asserting the truth, of you asserting yourself, of you protecting yourself. You have to be credible. You have to be on the right side. And that doesn't mean you have to have not made any mistakes. It just means that you have to ensure that when the mudslinging commences, there's a limit to how much mud they can sling your way. Because believe me, if an organisation wants to tear someone down, they'll go right down to the depths of the emails to see. That's why I say to you guys, make sure you use your emails for work-related things. You've got your personal emails. Use your personal emails for personal things. Don't be writing personal things on your work emails because they will get it. They will. Especially when you choose to go up against an organisation that refuses to accept responsibility, acknowledge responsibility, and understand how complicit that they are in the negative experiences of employees. If I leave you with this, one of the biggest and most important lessons I learned when watching the parliamentary committee with Dominic Cummings, it was that organisations are backed by lawyers, HR teams, managers that are loyal to them. But you have to understand that you have to be loyal to yourself. No one's going to have your back more than you. No one. The witness that you consider a work colleague who you've known for years will never have your back the way you will. We're talking about systems built to oppress us. These are organisations that invest money to develop white or non-black members of staff before they will even look at us. So you can't expect organisations to choose you because you're right. So you better shine your eyes. You better learn from the likes of Dominic Cummings and understanding that when you go into an organisation, you're going there for whatever objective that you have. You want to climb that career ladder, you want experience, maybe you're even there just for the money. But when you get there, do not forget that when these people are ready to go toe to toe with you, you're just another employment number. So it's important that you do what you need to do, i.e. create a burn folder to protect you. Make that burn folder your covering. And this isn't going to be the last that we've heard of Dominic Cummings. What he has done is sprinkled crumbs. And that's what you do. When you're making a complaint about your manager, to your manager, organisation, whatever it is, or maybe to HR, you don't go telling them what you have. Just stick to the facts. When they reply and start rebutting all these things, that's when you put a little bit of crumbs. Please find attached for your attention. For the avoidance of doubt, please find attached. You just give them 1-2 things there. Give them a chance to think. When you go to battle, you don't tell everybody the tools that you have or the weapons that you have. When you go to battle, you don't go and start telling them your plans, do you? So why are you so willing to say in a complaint or when you're raising an issue to tell them everything you have in your burn folder? Your burn folder is for the protection of you. When they say, oh, it didn't happen, or the person says, I wasn't there, you say, oh, really? Please find attached. That's how you use a burn folder. And last week, Dominic Cummings taught all of us, reaffirmed to all of us, the importance of a burn folder, why we have a burn folder, and how to use one. I'm going to leave it there. I've really enjoyed this episode and I was so looking forward to doing it. So I'm really happy that I've been able to deliver it. If you guys have any work-related dilemmas, work-related life dilemmas, please email hello@toytalks.com. If you want to keep abreast of everything Toy Talks related, please access the website www.toytalks.com. If you are interested in any of our masterclasses, CV masterclass, interview masterclass, negotiation masterclass, mother and daughter masterclass, and most recently the redundancy masterclass. Again, they're all available on the toyatalks.com website. I'm of course on social media. My personal Instagram page is Toya_Washington. The Toya Talks Instagram page is Toya_Talks. You can find me on Clubhouse. Listen, Android users, you can now access Clubhouse. Yes, you heard it here. So my Clubhouse name is Toya Washington, and I have my own club called Toya Talks. Of course, you all know that I am on Snapchat, Toya Washington, all one word, or of course Twitter, Toya_W with the hashtag Toya Talks or Toya Talks Podcast. I have really enjoyed delivering this episode to you guys, and I would love for you, if you listen on Apple Podcasts, to rate and review this podcast. If you want to write to me, you've heard it already. The email address is hello@toyatalks.com. If you are in a situation that maybe at work you just don't understand how to get over it, just write to me. We'll always keep your anonymity, and I will always share it here on the podcast in terms of what the dilemma is and my advice, and it will always come from a place of knowledge and wisdom by the grace of God. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for joining me, for listening, to commit to the podcast, for taking the lessons and the learning lessons that I teach here. If you are new to the Toya Talks podcast, I'd really, really encourage you to listen to all the episodes. There's something to learn. And more importantly, I share my personal experiences. Like, it has been a journey to get here with the podcast, and I have loved each and every episode that I've delivered. We don't just talk about the world of work. We talk about life as well, because what the world of work is so intrinsic into the fabric of every part of our life, relationships, home life, friendships, you name it. And I'm recognizing that as much as I teach and educate you guys how to navigate the world of work and life, you know, understanding that we spend a lot of time at work, and life and work are interlinked, and there's no way that I could separate the two. So yeah, we're just going on this journey, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm hoping that you guys are too, or at least I know you guys are, because you let me know. If you want to share anything with me, then write into me, let me know. And I'm going to see you guys next week. So each and every Tuesday, you know, we have a brand new episode of the Toya Talks podcast. If there is a topic that you want me to talk about that you feel like needs a bit more explaining, or I haven't spoken about it, again, you can suggest and email me at hello@toyatalks.com. I have loads of episodes coming up. Between now and the end of the year, we have quite a few episodes that I have done the treatment for, so I'm really looking forward to delivering. And I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to ask you guys to make sure you self-care and have an amazing rest of the week. No matter what day you're listening to this podcast episode, make sure that you take a cup of tea, coffee, kick back and listen. And I want to thank you guys for always supporting me. I'm going to leave it there. I'll see you again next week for a brand new episode of the Toya Talks podcast. My name is Toya Washington, and you have been listening to the Toya Talks podcast.